Hello, my name is John, and today we're in the cockpit of the freshly released AJS-37 Viggen, made by Leatherneck Simulations. In this video I wanted to take a first look at the aircraft and see what the different instruments do, and after that I wanted to do a startup as well as a takeoff. So let's get going. And I also have to mention at this point that this video is probably obsolete already, because everyone and their dog already had the chance to make a video about the aircraft. But I haven't had one, so yeah. Let's get going anyway. Okay. First of all, here in the cockpit, there are a couple of things that directly come into our eyesight. But I think I will start on the bottom left down here. And in this video, I only want to cover the most important controls, as I didn't have too much time with the aircraft yet. So we have to keep it within the limit which I know. And this handle right here on the left is one of the most important handles probably. It's the landing gear lever. It goes up and down. It doesn't matter if you move it on the ground, so that's fine. Next to it we have the automatic auto throttle control lever. Up here it's off, and if you move it down it's on. And this one helps you to land the aircraft, especially on short runways, as it will keep different speeds depending on wherever you have your landing gear extended or not. And it apparently shortens the landing distance, especially for less experienced pilots, so that's nice. Then continuing upwards, this lever here is for the instrument lights, as well as the instrument or the panel backlights and the floodlights. Then we have some mechanical controls or random controls for other stuff, not that important. Up here we have our throttle, which we can unlock here and lock again. We'll look at that later. And then we have a separate joystick here, and this one is used for several things, mostly radar control. So if you want to operate your radar, you would have to let go of the throttle. And you also guide the RB-05 missile visit. And yeah, that's all done here. We will have a look at that in another video probably, if I might do one. Then continuing through that, while we have more radar controls back here, we have some engine related controls up here, including the main battery switches and generator switches and all that stuff. Then here we have one of the most important switches. It's the master mode switch. It goes from pre-planning phase to navigation mode to attack mode to recon mode and the different landing modes. All quite difficult to get your head around, or probably not difficult, but you have to know when to use which mode for whatever you want him to do right now, but we will talk about that as well. Then up here we have the canopy control lever. We can actually just close the canopy, and the canopy will come down, as you can see, so that's nice. Then we have some radio controls up here, some light controls up here. Then we have some indicators here, including the probably most important one of the three is the trim indicator, which shows you the trim between plus and minus 10 degrees, nose up or nose down. Then we have one of the warning light panels up here. We have the reverser switch up here. If you pull it out, the engine goes into reverse thrust, which is I think the first aircraft in DCS that actually has reverse thrust, so that's quite cool. You can do a lot of cool stuff. I already tried some like making J-turns and stuff like that. Quite nice. Then up here we have some controls for the autoflight system, including the stabilization mode, the altitude hold mode, and the altitude hold mode. Up here we have the master warning light blinking whenever something is going wrong. Then we have the alpha indicator showing us the angle of attack. Then below that we have the main attitude indicator with the ILS indicators on the side and on the bottom. You're probably already used to those, or already know those if you're not new to flight simulators. To the left of that we have the airspeed indicator, the primary airspeed indicator, showing the speed in kilometers per hour on the outer scale and Mach on the digits in between. Then we have some radio stuff again. Below that we have the main altimeter. It shows the altitude in meters, and down here we currently have set the QFE, which is the field level elevation set to 0 basically, and it works like any other altimeter, just in meters. And then moving to the right, we have the primary horizontal situation indicator on the outside of the radar display. The radar display in the between, currently dark because the radar is turned off, but it will illuminate once we start up the aircraft and enable the radar. The outer navigation or HSI has a couple of indicators here as well. For example, up here is the main navigation indicator that shows you where to go. Above that we have the HUD on the gun side, and the HUD is quite rudimentary. It's one of the first HUD systems, I guess, and you will have to get used to that, or at least I am having some issues, or not some issue, but it's different than what we're used to, I guess, or what I'm used to. Because, for example, you can move it up and down depending on the angle of attack you have. You won't see anything in the HUD if you're not moving it up or down accordingly. So that's something new. Then next to that we have the colliminator side, and basically the AJS got upgraded to carry the RB-75 missiles, which you already know under a different name, and basically it's the AGM-65 Maverick. And they figured out, well, the cockpit is quite tiny, where do we put a TV screen for aiming the Maverick? And they figured out they can't put a TV screen anywhere because they would have to remove other stuff, and you see there's not much free space. So they put up this collimator site, and by some weird optics wizardry or whatever is going on in there, some magic I guess, you have a full screen behind that, and you can see the full screen by looking through there. And it's quite nice. Nicely simulated actually in DCS, so we're going to take a look at that once we are getting there, but in another video. Below that we have the clock, some switches regarding the altimeters. You will have to use those at one point or another. Next to that we have the G meter, currently showing 1 G, which is fine. Then we have the backup altitude indicator here, and the backup speed indicator in kilometers per hour again here. Below that we have the engine RPM indicator. It shows the tens of RPM on the outside and the ones of RPM in the inside. Like this one turns 10 times when the other needle turns 1 time. Then we have 3 green lights, or white lights I guess, that indicate the afterburner stage you have set, which is quite useful if you don't know, or like with the throttle or with a normal flight sim throttle you don't feel any dents. But with these lights you can easily see in which afterburner stage you are. Below that we have the differential pressure indicator. This is basically an engine related device that gives you the correlation between input and output pressure, and can be useful for stuff I guess. And to the left of that we have the course indicator, or backup magnetic indicator, showing you the current heading, currently showing heading 160 approximately. And above that we have the backup altimeter, which we can also set and use. Continuing over to the right, up here we have the distance indicator. It shows the distance to the next navigation waypoint or target waypoint or whatever you have selected. And above that we have the indicator for which waypoint we have selected, either be it an airfield or a navigation waypoint or whatever. And below that we have the fuel indicator, currently showing about 102% of fuel or 105% of fuel. No, 102 is closer to it, sorry. And that's because we have an external tank, so we can get over 100% internal fuel. And these dashed lines will move up once you power up the aircraft, and they show the minimum fuel required to get back to the airfield. So you will know that that is what you want to have to return to the airfield and possibly make it to your alternate as well. And yeah, continuing over to the right hand panel here, we have another master warning panel. Then we have some more instruments related to our oxygen, and up here we have the nozzle indicator showing up us how open our nozzle is. And this is also relating to the afterburner stages. If you're in stage 1, then the needle will be somewhere at the 1, and if you are in stage 2 or 3, the needle will be in that corresponding stage. And during startup the nozzle opens and closes as well. And yeah, so continuing downwards we have the main navigation computer, or the main input panel. I guess you could call it a CDU, as you would in more modern aircraft. And this is probably the most complex part of the Viggen, as it allows you to or correspond or talk to the CK-37 navigation computer. And you will need this panel quite a lot, and it has only a few buttons on it, and because most of the stuff you do with it is done by entering codes, like you enter code 9099 for startups, and each weapon configuration has different codes you can enter to set some specific options up. And this is quite probably the most difficult thing about the Viggen, actually, as far as I have seen, because it's quite advanced and you have to remember the codes or write them down or something like that at least. But yeah, we will get our head around that as well. Next of that, we have the waypoint selector, allowing us to select any of our 9 waypoints and startup and landing airfield. Together with the navigation computer. It's quite a topic in its own, so I'm not going to cover too much of that right now. Then we have some more jammer and countermeasures related stuff down here. We have the lighting panel for exterior lights down here, and some more what was this switch again? Yeah, de-icing and cabin control or temperature control switches over here. Up here I think some transponder related switches, stuff like that, some circuit breakers we can actually pull if we desire to do so. Maybe they pop as well depending on the failure state you have set, so might be worth checking those. Some engine related switches that are normally left in the default position if not needed. And then down here we have the weapon selector switch, which allows us to configure those weapons again, and some more weapon related switches. And yeah, this is basically a short overview over the aircraft systems. I know we have covered a lot of stuff very quickly, and that's because there's a lot of stuff to cover, and I will probably do separate videos about all these things at another point. But yeah, for right now, I think this is enough as a basic overview, and we will continue with the next part of this video, and that's starting up the aircraft. What do you need to get the aircraft started? And I'm by no means doing a full startup, I'm just doing like a normal startup, which you can do in the simulator if you want to get going from cold and dark. So yeah, let's get going. So for the startup, we basically want to start at the main engine panel switch over here, or however you want to call the panel, I'm not sure of the name. But the first switch we want to engage is the battery switch, and this will bring the aircraft to life, and we already get greeted by a beeping, which is the master warning, and we can silence it by pressing this button up here. So we have our peace and quiet. And the next switch is a fuel pump related switch, and it's the low pressure fuel valve opening the fuel to the engine. Now continuing onwards, we can already turn on the generator switch. That will allow us for the generator to kick in once the aircraft has started. And we can also move the throttle forward from the cutoff position to the idle position by clicking the switch right there. Now the next thing we want to do is press this switch here on the radio panel, which will bring up the radio navigation menu. And by clicking F8 for ground crew and opening the F1 menu, sorry, that was the wrong menu. Let's do that again. Press the switch down there, press F8 and press ground electric power. And we want to press F1 to turn that on, because we want to have ground power for the further startup. You can do the startup of the aircraft with battery power only. However, as we want to look at the navigation stuff and set that up before we get going, we want to turn on the ground power. And you might have heard that right now. You heard some devices spool up, some cooling fans starting running, and also the gyros aligning. And that's a sign that we have ground power now. Now the next thing we want to do is to turn to the back left here, and we want to insert the data cartridge. And this black thing here is the data cartridge, and it stores the information about our flight, and including waypoints and stuff like that. And you only get the data obviously if it has been set in the mission editor previously. On a multiplayer server or any server where you don't have any pre-planned missions, you want to, or you must, enter the data manually by entering the waypoints and all that stuff down here. But thankfully, as it's quite a lot of work, we don't have to do that right now. So if you zoom in into our CDU here, we want to do something right here, and we want to switch to the ref Lola position, and then we want to enter our first stroke code ever, which is we want to go into the input mode first, as we won't enter anything, and we want to enter our first stroke code 9099. And now we have set it, and to enter it we want to hit the LS SKU key down here. And now you see the 9 blinking, and then you see some other lights aligning and going off, and now we have all zeros, which means that the data has been taken by the computer and considered valid. And now we can switch the input-output switch to output again, and we go to the active position menu item over here. And what we did by doing that right now was setting or loading the data from the data cartridge, which we have entered back here, into the computer. And you can only do that while on the ground, so we want to do it as early as possible so we don't forget it. Now, on the right hand panel we can also turn on all the lights, which make the Viggen very visible, and especially during night quite useful. So we have done that. The next thing we can do when we are over here is turn on the oxygen, so we don't get hypoxia at higher altitude, which is always good. Then continuing from the right to the left, I usually like to turn on turn off the caging for the backup HSI, backup altitude indicator, which we did right now. Now the next thing, once we're over here, we can do, and the next thing we do is actually starting the engine. And doing that is just putting the start system switch into the start position. And now we just wait until the engine spools up. Takes a couple of seconds. And you can also hear it, obviously. And there are some lights indicating that the engine is being started. One of them is the start system switch, or light, and the other one is the however that is called. And the TAN system, which I think is the ignition system. I'm not very good at pronouncing Swedish names and system names, especially if you have guessed, or if you couldn't guess already. So yeah, forgive me for that, please. Now we have most of the system started, which is a good thing. Now the next thing I usually like to do at this point is to arm the ejection seat up here by moving that switch, which is quite useful at this point, because if something goes wrong we can just escape our endeavor. And yeah, we will want to bring up the ground crew menu again by pressing F8, F2, and we want to turn off the ground power, so that the ground crew doesn't yell at us because we drive off with the cable still connected.
Ground power is now off.
Okay, ground power is now off. Now we are pretty much ready to taxi. We can turn on the taxi and landing light down there. And the last thing I want to do is setting the mode switch from the readiness position to the nav position, which is the navigation mode we want to use during the flight. And now on this airfield we can actually make a choice if we go left and right or right, but I don't think it makes any difference. So just let me taxi to the runway, and I will be right back with you at the runway for the next steps we have to do before we can get into the air finally. Okay, now we have finally reached the runway, and there are 2 more things we want to do and make sure they are set before we go. And one of them is the trim. We want to have a couple of degrees nose up trim, and I think about 3 degrees or 2.5 degrees is about right most of the time. So we have set that right now. And the last thing you want to do is to set up the navigation system. And basically on the runway here we want to make sure that the navigation system knows our current heading. And this is something you have to do because the navigation system is not that advanced, and it's one of the earliest inertial navigation systems on any military aircraft actually. And we want to hit the reference button on our joystick. You should probably map that as it is quite a often used button. And by doing that, if you watch the HSI, it does a small alignment of the heading to the runway heading. You want to do that for the most accurate navigation data possible. And yeah, now we are pretty much ready for takeoff at this point. And I will advance the throttle to the second afterburner stage. That's all we need. And once we reach about 270 degrees, I will slowly rotate. Don't use too much rotation, as the aircraft is quite fast rotating actually, and we don't want to risk a tail strike, which is very much possible in the Viggen. And after rotation we will just wait for positive climb, bring the gear up, and then keep climbing at a medium pace. And we will bring it out of afterburner once we have reached some safe height. So yeah, let me get started by bringing the throttle forward to stage 2. Currently you have to be very careful of the rudder, as it's very sensitive at about 100 kilometers and more, and you will see me swerving a bit, I guess, in a second or so. I tried to use curves as good as I could, but you see I'm not even touching the pedals very much, and we're swerving quite much. Anyway, brought the nose up, bring the gear up now. We just want to climb out. So the gear is coming up, as you can hear, and once it's up we will accelerate further, as we are doing right now, and we can already bring the throttle back a bit, bring it into first stage of afterburner, and then bring it out of afterburner, which makes the aircraft a bit more quiet, which is always appreciated. Now we're currently climbing through 500 meters above airfield level. We use the trim to get the aircraft into a stable flight. And yeah, this pretty much concludes the first look and startup video of the Viggen. I hope you enjoyed this Viggen, not this Viggen. Yeah, I guess I hope you enjoyed the Viggen as well, but I also hope you enjoyed this video. And I wish you a safe flight and have fun trying out new things in the Viggen. I will see about doing more videos, probably get some up in the next days. And yeah, fly safe and have a good one.